All right, I want to turn to the other big political development over the weekend. It's Elon Musk's proclamation that he's going to launch a third party, something he's calling the America Party. Well, right now, there's no clear platform, no infrastructure, just a few wealthy guys like Mark Cuban and Anthony Scaramucci, both saying they're in, which, if we're being honest, I might argue is kind of a red flag. Oh, maybe we'll call it an orange flag. Now, let me be clear. I'm totally sympathetic to the idea. I mean, count me in on the goal of breaking up the two-party stranglehold. I've been preaching this, right? I've said it over and over on this podcast. I've said it in my writings on Substack. The biggest threat to functional governance in this country isn't polarization alone. It is the two parties no longer represent the full ideological spectrum of the American electorate. We've got a broken binary system trying to contain what is in practice a multi-party country. And the voters themselves know it. So I'm not opposed to the mission. I'm just skeptical, deeply skeptical of the messenger. Because if Elon Musk were serious about building a viable third party, there's already a blueprint for his politics. In fact, there are multiple. Take the Libertarian Party, which already has significant, though not automatic, ballot access infrastructure. There's the Forward Party, which I discussed in depth on this podcast with its CEO, Lindsay Drath. She laid out just how difficult it is to build a credible political alternative in this country because of the duopoly of the two major parties essentially controlling ballot access. So how much of it hinges on state-by-state organizing, fundraising, legal battles for ballot access, and candidate recruitment. None of that is present here. Musk doesn't seem interested in sharing a movement. He only seems interested in owning one. And it reminds me of his Twitter saga. The platform was doing, say, 80 to 85% of what he wanted. But because the platform wasn't doing 100% of what he wanted, he got angry and bought it out of spite, right? And now he's applying the same logic to politics. If he can't control the outcome, like with MAGA and Donald Trump, he's going to try and create his own arena. But that's not how a democracy works. And that's not certainly how a sustainable democracy would work. And let's not ignore the motivation. Musk has recently lost ground with the Trump administration, lost his guy at NASA, lost the EV tax credits. He's feuding with major advertiser. He doesn't like the political responses he's been getting from his AI company. So is this a political movement or just the latest chapter in a billionaire's identity project? So to be fair, a lot of political movements start out as frustration or even vengeance, right? Teddy Roosevelt was just pissed off at Taft. Okay. Ross Perot was angry at Bush. MAGA is essentially a product of Donald Trump's grievance with being denied a seat at the GOP's establishment table. Musk's move isn't all that different, except he's not really building something new. He's just naming something right now. And even then, it's not clear what the ideology is. He says he's against the duopoly. Great. But is he for transparency, ranked choice voting, open primaries, ballot access reform, coalition governance? A real third-party effort needs to say what it's for. It needs to be about something. And it's what we talked about with Lindsay Drath. If you're not working to fix the electoral machinery, then you're just a protest candidate with a checkbook. Now, here's my magic wand theory. If I could redesign the system from scratch, we don't just need one new party. I think we need two new parties, one that breaks off the Democrats and one that breaks off the Republicans. Because today's two major parties are united more by culture war identity than by any coherent policy ideologies. Just look at the left right now. It's fractured most over the future of capitalism. You've got traditional market-based liberals who believe government should be a partner with the private sector. But you've also got a rising block of voters and politicians, particularly younger, more diverse, more urban, who are increasingly open to rethinking the idea of capitalism itself. Call it a tilt toward democratic socialism or economic progressive populism. But it is a real divide inside the left movement. Culturally, they're pretty aligned. But it's on that actual economic policy that they're divided. On the right, the splits, there's also a pretty significant split. They're culturally pretty united, but it's on actual economic policy and foreign policy that they're divided. The split is less about, it's about, their split is a little bit more about America's role in the world. There's still a traditional wing that believes in free markets, free trade, small government, low taxes, international engagement. But they're now in tension with the rising isolationist wing, nationalist, protectionist, skeptical of institutions, foreign and domestic, and nativist. You have the center right's pro-immigration. The far right is anti-immigration. By the way, it's mostly due to economics. So what we really need, and I've said this before, are new checks from within each party's ideological family. The Forward Party could become the center-left capitalist voice that believes in pluralism, data-driven governance, and a limited but effective public sector. A check on the far left's desire to upend the system altogether. The Libertarian Party, if properly empowered, could be the culturally agnostic, fiscally responsible small government advocate that is a skeptical counterweight to the populist nationalism, code for strong, forceful, top-down government, which dominates today's Republican base. Together, those forces could pull the center back into relevance in a form that's not simply centrism first, but compromise first, and then create governing coalitions that actually reflect how Americans think and live, not just how the parties raise money. Because the reason the no labels idea mix, right, where they got a handful of Democrats and Republicans who promised to govern together and that they would hold, but what would happen, right? The party bosses would say, we're going to freeze your money for re-election. And what would happen? They come crawling back and vote party line. So you're not going to get this from actual members of either major party. The only way this happens is if those who care about those things leave their respective major parties and join one of these fledgling third parties, because you create this group, because Elon Musk is starting a great conversation. And he's right. It doesn't take many. You have 10 to 15 House members as members of these third parties and 4 to 6 senators as members of these third parties. You become the majority maker. You don't have to even have the second most amount of members in the institution, as long as you have enough that would decide who the majority is. And that would bring about some coalition incrementalism that actually would move us forward so that we wouldn't always take these giant steps backward every time we fire one of the two major parties from governance. So look, it's Musk's money can play a role here. I'm skeptical of Musk himself. If he's serious about this, he'll invest in one of these parties that already exists. If this is nothing but an ego trip of his own and his own weird jealousy of Trump's power, then he is going to sit here and fund his own party and just piss away his money. But if that's what he's doing here, and if you're a member of the Forward Party, Libertarian Party, look, I get it. Go see what's up. Go see if he's actually serious about this. But be careful being beholden to him, because he may have a motivation that is simply all on its own. And again, the Twitter experience may be a huge tell. So look, it's an interesting development. I'm skeptical of him. I don't think he's patient enough to do what it would take to build something that would be durable. But guess what? There really is some energy and interest out there. I think there's a new Gallup poll that had it over 55% interest in a third party. And trust me, every time we've asked the question, voters always claim they're interested in it, and then they don't vote it when it comes. And it's like the campaign finance reform issue, the debt issue. Voters say these are important issues, but they never vote on it. Third parties, voters say they would like more choices, and yet they default to the red or the blue. But a lot of this is infrastructure, and so you're going to need billionaires to help finance the lawsuits. Because again, I think the duopoly is a violation of the Equal Protection Clause in the Constitution. And I'd like to see these minor parties band together and make that argument stronger. Then again, you have a very political Supreme Court who may just look at things through the prism of the red and the blue.